Hello, and welcome to a Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness video, where today I'm going to be using the Claydol line to beat the game. Now, I do have some really high hopes for Claydol, because I think it's going to do very well in this game. With its dual typing of Ground and Psychic, it gets access to some of the strongest moves in the game, as well as a wide variety of moves outside of that. And on top of that, it has the Levitate ability, making it immune to all Ground-type moves, so it really does have a lot going in its favor. But, of course, before we get to Claydol, we must start with Baltoy, who has 40 HP, 40 attack, 55 defense, 40 special attack, 70 special defense, and 55 speed, making it a very well-rounded Pokemon with a bit higher defenses. And through level up, it gets access to Psychic, Normal, Ground, and Rock-type moves, which Rock is going to be very nice, especially in the late game. And then moving over to its TMs, where it gets great moves like Ice Beam, Earthquake, and most importantly, Psychic, because it doesn't get that through level up for whatever reason. But in return, it gets Psybeam at level 11, so the early game is going to be very fast, I hope. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to our Baltoy in particular, which has a hasty nature, raising its speed but lowering its defense. Now, since this is more of a defensive Pokemon, that shouldn't really hurt it too much, and the extra speed will be very nice. It gets the Levitate ability, which prevents me from being hit by all Ground-type moves, and by level 10 it gets Confusion, Harden, Rapid Spin, and Mud Slap. So with that, let's go ahead and get right into it. At level 11, Baltoy gets the move Psybeam, which I teach over Confusion, and then I go into the battle against the old man very quickly. Right away, I go for Mud Slap into the Abra because it's the only move that does decent damage to it. Unfortunately, it's still not even doing half, despite Abra's terrible defense, and so unfortunately it will take 3 shots to take down. And the old man is actually pretty well geared towards taking down Baltoy, with all of his Pokemon having moves that do super effective damage against it. Abra goes down, which brings out Shroomish, which has Absorb, Abra had Ice Punch, and Horsey, of course, has Water Gun. So all these Pokemon have the potential to deal a ton of damage to Baltoy. I've just gotten very lucky throughout this first attempt. Horsey goes down, Shroomish hits an Absorb, not really doing too much damage, and I get a crit taking Shroomish down to a Sliver. And it gets a crit right back before I take it down with another crit. Nicely done, Baltoy, but anyway, at level 15, Baltoy gets the move Rock Tomb, which I teach over Rapid Spin, and then I go against the Power Rangers, where today I decide to fight Purple because I have super effective damage against all of his Pokemon. Anyway, with that, let's go ahead and begin just a little bit of rambling. If you are enjoying this video so far, consider liking, and if you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Now, Baltoy and Claydol are another line of Pokemon that I really like, but it's also a line of Pokemon I've never actually used before. I mean, I used it in the Shadow Pokemon video, but I mean, I've never actually used it in a more standard type of playthrough. So it'll be interesting to see how it does. Anyway, with that, let's go ahead and move on. At level 25, Baltoy gets the move Ancient Power, which I teach over Rock Tomb, and then I go into the battle against Lovrina. She leads with a Beautiful Eye and a Love Disc, and right away I go for Ancient Power into Love Disc, which may seem a bit silly, but the thing is that I'm almost certain Beautiful Eye will go down to a single one, and I want more opportunities to get an Omni Boost. That way the rest of her team won't be nearly as bad. Now, I wasn't expecting to take so much damage so quickly, so I decided to go ahead and change tactics and see about taking down the Love Disc, which it doesn't quite do, and I confirm that Ancient Power does take down Beautiful Eye. So with that, I go back to do a little bit more training, where I run into another Baltoy. Hello there, other Baltoy. Goodbye, other Baltoy. And then I go back into the battle, now at level 33, and attempt number 7, where right away I'm able to take down the Beautiful Eye and get an Omni Boost. Then out comes the Roselia. The Love Disc's Water Guns aren't doing nearly as much damage anymore. Roselia goes down to a single Psybeam, but I already know it did before. And then out comes our final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Delcatty. Go for Psybeam, dealing well over half, and they're able to take me down below half health, but at this point it's already too late. Psybeam finishes off Delcatty, and then all that's left is the Love Disc, which goes down to a single Psybeam. So while it did take quite a few attempts, it wasn't too bad after a single Omni Boost. So anyway, with that, of course you can't have a Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness video without the obligatory Mirror B. Hello there, Mirror B. Well, anyway, goodbye, Mirror B. At level 36, Baltoy evolves into Claydol, which is going to give it a huge boost in stats, and at the same time it also gets the move Hyper Beam, which I never actually plan on using, but it's just kind of fun to have. So I teach over Harden, and then Claydol has 60 HP, 70 attack, 105 defense, 70 special attack, 120 special defense, and 75 speed. And something I didn't realize when going into this is that Claydol's attack and special attack are both 70. So originally, I thought that Claydol was going to be more of a special attacker, and like the ground type moves in a lot of cases are secondary to it, or vice versa. So in this case, I don't actually have to make any compromises on whether or not I want this to be a special or physical attacker because it's both. Anyway, the other stats are all very solid, so with that, let's go ahead and move on. And I go ahead and pick up the Ralts here for the, Anyway, at the Railgun Tower, I pick up my two favorite TMs, Hidden Power and Protect. And of course, I'm going to teach Hidden Power right away, which for Claydol happens to be Hidden Power Electric at 64 base power, so it's definitely a very strong one, and it gives it type coverage that Claydol just doesn't get, so I'd say overall a very good hidden power type. Anyway, with that, at level 42, Claydol gets the move Cosmic Power, which I decide to teach over Mud Slap, which might have not been the best choice, because then I go into the battle against Snaddle, he leads with a Lantern and a Quagsire, and I go for Psybeam right away, which doesn't quite take down the Quagsire, but does confuse it, so it might just take itself down. Not quite, but I could use this as an opportunity to fish for an Omni Boost. Unfortunately, I don't get it. Then he sends out his next Pokemon, which is a Shadow Lunatone. And my best move to deal with it is actually Hidden Power, which I decide to go for, but misread it and go for Cosmic Power instead. Yeah, that's kind of the only issue right now, is I have Ancient Power, Hidden Power, and Cosmic Power. And at a glance, they all look about the same. So unfortunately, I did misclick there, though I guess raising my defense could end up being very helpful here. Go for Ancient Power, which doesn't quite take down the Lunatone, and unfortunately, once again, no Omni Boost, and I get finished off by the Shadow Sky. So now moving on to attempt number 4, I go back in, go for Psybeam, which now takes down Quagsire. Now that I'm 4 levels higher, then out comes the Shadow Lunatone once again. Water Gun is doing much less damage, go for Ancient Power into it, dealing well over half, which is a huge improvement from before, but it is able to set up Shadow Sky, which might actually end up working in my favor. Another Ancient Power takes it down, and then he sends out Cast Form, which should absolutely go down to a single Psybeam. And so I go for it, and it even gets a critical hit, which is definitely not necessary, but it's good to see. Anyway, he sends out his final Pokemon, Metang, and it's at this point I kind of regret getting rid of Mud Slap because it would have done super effective damage against Metang, though at the same time Hidden Power Electric might actually deal just as much, if not more. An unfortunate crit takes me down to 33, and I get taken down to red. The Fruity Pebbles come down, taking me down to 16 health, though Lantern does go down at the same time. Go for Hidden Power, not enough to take down Metang. It takes me at a 7, and luckily the Shadow Sky ended, and I'm able to beat him on the 4th attempt. Now at the Snag'em base, I pick up the TM for Psychic, and I teach it over Psybeam, and then I go into the battle against Gonzap. He leads with a Nuzleaf and an Electrode, and on the first turn I get hit by a Fake Out, though the Electrode only has the move Sonic Boom to hit me, so it's not really a threat. Go for Ancient Power, not quite enough to take down the Nuzleaf, unfortunately, and so it's able to hit a Feint Attack. I go for another Ancient Power to finish it off, and then he sends out his next Pokemon, which is a Vileplume. And then I go for Psychic into Vileplume, which takes it down in a single hit. And then he sends out his next Pokemon, which is a Whiscash. Now, Whiscash might actually be able to survive a Psychic, but it's really my best option anyway. It does survive on just a sliver, and so it's able to use Water Pulse, taking me down to 34. Luckily, no confusion. Go for another Psychic to finish it off, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, which is a Skarmory. Now, I do have Hidden Power Electric, though I'm not sure if it's going to take it down in a single hit. But it does, and then all that's left is that Electrode, which, while taking me down to 21 HP, it still couldn't take me down anyway because Sonic Boom is set damage, and I take it down with Psychic. So with that, at the top of the pyramid, I pick up the Earthquake TM, which I decide to teach over Cosmic Power, and then I go into the battle against Gorgon, who leads with a Lairon and a Celio, and right away I go for Psychic to take down the Celio, and then from here on out, because the Lairon is never going to use Protect, I can just use Earthquake to defeat the rest of his team. In fact, I probably could have done that from the start, but I wasn't sure if Celio was going to go down. Anyway, Ursaring goes down to an Earthquake, Primeape goes down to an Earthquake, and then all that's left is the Shadow Hypno, which once again goes down to an Earthquake, and Gorgon is defeated in record time. So now moving on to the final area of the game, and even though there were a good few losses right near the beginning, Claydol is still doing extremely well, so as long as it doesn't crack under the pressure, it should be able to get through the game very quickly. So moving on to Lovrina, she leads with a Gardevoir and a Corvus, and right away I go for Earthquake, taking them both down in a single hit. And in response, she sends out her next two Pokemon, a Roselia and a Shadow Farfetch'd, which unfortunately I can't just use Earthquake to take down, so I go for Hidden Power, taking it down in a single hit, and then she sends out her final Pokemon, a Shadow Altaria. Roselia is able to set up Leech Seed, but it's really not going to do much, but either way, I still want to get rid of it, and then all that's left is that Shadow Altaria, which goes for Shadow Break, dealing almost no damage whatsoever, so I go for Psychic, taking it down to low yellow, And because I want to save on some PP, I decided to go ahead and use Hidden Power instead to finish her off and beat Lovrina on the first attempt. Inside the Volcano Cipher base, I run into another Claydol. Hello, other Claydol. Goodbye, other Claydol. And now we move on to the battle against Snaddle. He leads with a Quagsire and a Matang, and right away I go for Psychic, taking down Quagsire right away, and then he sends out Scizor. Now, unfortunately, I don't really have anything amazing against Scizor, but Earthquake does take down Matang, and actually does take down Scizor as well. He then sends out his first Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Solrock, and Cast Form. I go for Psychic into the Cast Form, taking it down in a single hit, and then out comes Starmie, his next Shadow Pokemon and final Pokemon. Solrock goes for Shadow Sky, but at this point it's a bit too late. I go for Earthquake, taking down the Starmie in a single hit, and all that's left is that Solrock, which actually has Shadow Panic. I didn't know it had that. I go for Hidden Power, taking it not even down to half. It goes for Shadow Rave, not doing much damage at all. And even though this battle is basically mine, it might take a while depending on my luck. Now thankfully I haven't hit myself in confusion yet. Okay, maybe I shouldn't have said that. On the next turn, I'll be sure to take it down, and I do. So with that, we beat Snaddle on the first attempt, and now we move on to Ardos, who leads with an Alakazam and a Shadow Swallow. And right away, I'm going to get rid of the Swallow, which I'm actually a bit surprised I outspeed, though my level advantage is huge now. Alakazam is going for Ice Punch, dealing a good bit of damage, and always having a chance to freeze, though luckily it didn't. I did go for Psychic into Kingdra, hoping it would take it down before it used Hydro Pump, but unfortunately it survives with just a little bit of health left. I go for Earthquake to take it and Alakazam down, and then he sends out his next Pokemon, a Heracross and a Shadow Electabuzz. And because Electabuzz is weak to Earthquake, I go ahead and go for another one. It takes Heracross down to half and takes down the Electabuzz, bringing out his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Snorlax. And Heracross goes for Mega Horn, nearly taking me down on the spot. I take down Heracross, deal a lot of damage to Snorlax, and it hits a Shadow End. Okay, well that's a bit unfortunate, but I go back into the battle, now a level higher. And instead of going for Mega Horn right away, it instead goes for Rock Tomb. And for some reason, this Earthquake is able to take down Snorlax in a single hit, despite it not even being close before. Must have just been the lowest range. Anyway, I go into the battle against Gorgon, and just like before, I go for Earthquake, taking down both of his Pokemon right away. Then out comes Aggron and Walrein, which Earthquake takes down as well. Except it actually doesn't, because Walrein is able to survive on a Sliver, which makes me fear that Poliwrath is also going to survive on a Sliver. But there's no time to think about that. I go for another Earthquake, and Poliwrath does actually survive. Luckily, it does just go for Shadow Sky on the first turn, so it's not really all that dangerous. And I know for a fact I outspeed his final Pokemon, which is the Shadow Mr. Mime, so I go for another Earthquake, taking down both of them. And with that, we beat Gorgon on the first attempt. Now moving on, and I decide to teach Ice Beam over Hidden Power before going into the battle against Eldest. He leads with a Shadow Manectric and Ninjask, and right away I go for Earthquake to deal with the Manectric. Unfortunately, Ninjask actually does outspeed and gets an Omni Boost on the first turn, which is extremely unfortunate. Then out comes his next Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Salamence. Now despite there being a pseudo-legendary on the field, I actually think Ninjask is the bigger threat here because of that Omni Boost, so I take it down first, which then brings out Flygon. And Salamence goes for Shadow Rush, dealing quite a bit of damage. I go for Ice Beam to take it down, and then out comes this next Pokemon, which is a Shadow Marowak. And Marowak is always a bit dangerous because it's holding the Thick Club item. So I go for Ice Beam to take it down right away, and it does, bringing out his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Lapras. Now, Hidden Power Electric would have been nice for this part, but I'm almost certain it would have been a two-shot anyway. I take down the Flygon, and Lapras goes for Shadow Storm because it sees the KO because of my special defense drop. Well darn. Anyway, going back in for a second attempt, and it's exactly the same to start, except Ninjask doesn't get an Omni Boost right away, and isn't really dealing all that much damage with Silverwind. So this time I can actually focus on taking down the Salamence, which I know for a fact goes down to a single Ice Beam, and then he sends out Flygon. And Flygon really isn't all that dangerous. I mean, Crunch does have that chance to lower special defense, but it's not going to happen all that often, so I decide to go ahead and take down Ninjask this time, which then sends out the Marowak once again, which I know for a fact I can take down with a single Ice Beam. And then out comes the Shadow Lapras again, which as long as it doesn't see the KO is going to set up Shadow Sky. So I know I'll be able to take it down as long as I don't get that special defense drop. And so it gets taken down below half, sets up Shadow Sky, another Psychic takes it down, and then all that's left is the Flygon, which really isn't a threat whatsoever because of Ice Beam. So with that, we're able to beat Eldest on the second attempt. very easily, with only a little bit of luck needed. Anyway, with that, let's go and move on to the big box legendary, Lukia. And I go for Ice Beam right away, getting a critical hit, taking it down in a single shot. Very nice. Anyway, now moving into the final boss battle against Gravel, he leads with a Shadow, Moltres, and Rhydon, and I go for Ancient Power, taking Moltres down right away, though it was a critical hit. Then out comes Executor, Rhydon hits a Shadow End, taking itself down to half, and dealing quite a bit of damage to me. I go for Earthquake, which does take down the Rhydon and deals a decent amount of damage to Executor. Then out comes his next Pokemon, Tauros, which hits me with an Intimidate, lowering my attack, which unfortunately means that Ancient Power isn't going to be dealing as much damage as before. I take down the Tauros though, and then out comes Articuno, where Ancient Power is probably the most useful, and I go for it, and despite my attack being lowered, it actually does deal quite a bit of damage still. Though not quite enough to take it down, I go for another one to finish it off, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Zapdos. Now, as long as Executor doesn't end up hitting any more Shadow Ends, I think I win here. Except Zapdos actually survives. Luckily, Executor does miss. Go for another one to take it down, and then all that's left is the Executor. That misses again, and I'm able to take it down. So with that, Claydol gets a surprisingly easy first try victory. Now, I knew for a fact Reveal wasn't going to be all that difficult because Claydol just gets just about every single move it would need against him. But honestly, I wasn't expecting it to be the first try, and even though it was a bit lucky, I could have just Hot Protect on the second attempt, probably over Earthquake, and gotten through that fight on somewhere between the second and third attempt. So with that, how well did the Claydol line do? Well, it beat the game at a time of 8 hours, 39 minutes, and 16 seconds at level 73, with 17 fates throughout the game, 11 of those to bosses, and 6 of those to random trainers. Now, to go over the pros and cons of this Pokemon, I'd say that the biggest con of this Pokemon is just having to start out as Baltoy. Now, Baltoy is a pretty good Pokemon, but unfortunately it doesn't match up very well into Lovrina, who has a lot of super effective moves against it. And it really requires a little bit of luck with that 10% Omni Boost in order to get past her in a decent amount of time. And it doesn't evolve until level 36, which in this run it didn't end up evolving until about halfway through the ONBS building. And then the other only fight that was a bit of an issue was Snaddle. Now luckily I did have Hidden Power Electric, but like I said, I'm pretty sure Mud Slap would have been doing a similar amount of damage, and had I just done a little bit of extra training, because I was only 4 levels off from victory, I definitely could have gotten through that fight a little easier. But with that, let's go and move on to the positives, and honestly, there's a lot to talk about. Starting with its move pool, and it gets access to some of the best attacking types in the game, like Rock, Ground, Ice, and Psychic, making it very versatile throughout the entire game. On top of that, it has the Levitate ability, which, while it normally isn't all that much of a standout ability, in this case, because it gets Earthquake, Gorgon doesn't even go for Protect, so it's able to completely demolish both teams of his. Its defensive stats are really good, and even though its offenses are a bit mediocre, it's balanced out by the fact that it gets Stab on both Ground and Psychic. So, like I said, there's a ton of things this Pokemon does right. Unfortunately, it is just a little out of the S tier, and that's simply because Baltoy isn't the strongest Pokemon, and unfortunately Claydol also does have a few areas where it struggles, but it is an incredibly good Pokemon that finds itself at the top of the A+ tier. So with that, if you did enjoy this video, consider liking and subscribing. If you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Thank you so much for watching, and bye.